Welcome to Saddler Sessions. Our special guest is Henry Dwyer, who's travelled far and wide with his star mare, Asfoora. He's brought back plenty of good stories for us, like meeting King Charles at Royal Ascot, a victory where he got to silence a few doubters, some adventures in France where an Uber driver came to his rescue. Here he is, Henry Dwyer. Henry Dwyer, welcome to the Saddler Session. Now, you've got a special honour here, by the way, because we've had Melbourne Cup winning jockeys, we've had Kentucky Derby winning jockeys, we've had people have called Melbourne Cups and AFL Grand Finals. You're the first trainer on the show, so you're in elite company. Welcome, Henry.
Thanks, Edward. I've been telling you I'm coming in for a while, and I finally got here, so pleased to be with you.
No, great to have you here. Take us back to the beginning. Where did racing enter your life?
Very early on, I'd say, Edward. A lot of trainers are probably born into a racing family, which I wasn't. Albeit my dad was just an absolute devotee of the game. He bred a few horses, and he always raced a few horses, and loved going to the races. And being one of 5 children, I don't think he was allowed to leave the house without taking one or two of us wherever he went. So I generally got the Guernsey to the races on a Saturday or the Sunday in the bush or wherever we were going to where he had a runner. So yeah, just got dragged along, and I reckon I was punting on races, inverted commas, gamble responsibly, Edward, but punting on races from a very young age. And I think when I was about 10 or 11, I used to put my deepest voice on and ring up the TAB phone account and 266310343 and try and get a few bets on the trots on a Saturday night and the races during the week. And I think my school teachers knew pretty early on where my path lay, but it wasn't until later on that I had to deliver the bad news to my parents that I wanted to be a horse trainer.
So when did that come? Because you went to uni in Melbourne and did commerce and arts, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So all through school I was right into it, and on weekends I used to go to the races. My godfather, Peter McCarthy, his brother is Brendan McCarthy, so Caulfield trainer for many years. They had a farm in Tallarook when I was growing up, and we used to go up there occasionally and see the mares and the stallions and that sort of thing. And I just really couldn't see myself doing anything else from a young age, and I'd get carted around to the race with Dad, but obviously go to the race with Brendan on occasion as well and help him out. And I think sort of later in my school years, I was probably working in the stables a little bit down at Caulfield, and then all through uni, I was living on campus at Newman at Melbourne Uni, and that was very conveniently sort of a bike ride from Flemington Racecourse. So I probably spent my formative years in stables there for a few different trainers, and then obviously branched out later on.
So when you went to uni, were you thinking that you were going to go down the accounting path or something like that, or did you more want to have a qualification before becoming a trainer?
I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I needed to do something. I couldn't sort of just go straight from school to doing the horses. I did pretty well in school, and I got into uni, and I thought, well, I don't know what I want to do, but like a commerce arts degree is pretty much just for anyone that doesn't know what they want to do. There's no real future to it. You just sort of do little bits and bobs here and there, and you can chart your own path. And to be honest, my uni was pretty much just a social life. I was living on campus. I reckon I was going out 5 or 6 nights a week. I was working 5 or 6 mornings a week. There wasn't much time for uni in the middle, Edward. And I think it was the first year that online lectures came in vogue, and I kidded myself that I'd probably catch up at a later date prior to exams, but my records at the end of the year probably suggest that I didn't catch up too much.
So when was that first step into working properly in racing in a full-time kind of role?
Finished uni. That was a 5-year double degree. Obviously, I took a year off in between to travel overseas, and I saw the sights over there. By this stage, I was pretty proficient with the horses. I was working every morning. I was going to the races with horses on the weekends, strapping and that sort of thing. So I had enough sort of skill base to sort of travel a little bit. So I spent a bit of time over in England and not really worked. I just went and visited a few trainers and went to the race and that sort of stuff. I came back, finished uni. I reckon I went up to Euroa and worked for Tim Johnson up there at Ealing Park, which was sort of a medium-sized stud, which was just terrific because I reckon on a stud you learn more about horses in sort of 1 year than you do about horses in a training stable in 5 years. Just you're getting so much more of an oversight. If you go to a stable as a kid, you're mucking out boxes, you're leading them up and down the track, and that's just how it is. They're a busy environment, but you're just seeing them more in the natural environment in the paddock, and you're dealing with weanlings and foals and yearlings and stallions as it was at Ealing Park, and obviously dry mares and wet mares. And you're bandaging horses, you're injecting horses, you're sort of getting all that education there, which you wouldn't get in the stable. So I thought that was really crucial that year there, and then came back and I worked for Robert Smurden for a number of years in a full-time capacity. I ended up his assistant trainer there for a couple of years at Caulfield when I think he shifted from Flemington to Caulfield, and I was there at that stage. I think I got there the week or a couple of weeks after Robert gave up the grog. It was a bit of pretty good fun when he was on the grog, but he wasn't much fun when he was off it. So I got the wash up of that, but which is good. Robert was an amazing bloke to work for. He was very conscious to educate you along the way, and that's the thing that as a trainer you've got to do that with your staff. You're trying to produce good staff as well, and you just hold on to them as long as you can. If they're any good, they probably go training at some stage in the future. And it's your job to sort of foster that in them, I suppose. And he certainly did that in me. And towards the end of my time there, I had a couple of horses in work of my own with him, which was another great stepping stone. Along the way, I sort of worked for other trainers. I had a great 3 weeks working for your father, actually.
Yeah,
Edward.
I thought that. So I spoke to my brother, Tom, who you've had a lot to do with, and asked for some recommendations given his connection with you, and that was the main one that he said to ask about. So I didn't want Sadler Sessions to become Dr. Phil, but I've asked a couple of people this story, and he said it was 2 or 3 weeks. Someone else I spoke to said it was a little bit longer. How long was your tenure at John Sadler
mind,
Racing?
I've got it as 3 weeks, but it probably felt like a bit longer, Edward. No, like I get along terrifically with your dad. I did before and I did after, but probably just old bull, young bull. Probably didn't quite work out. I think the first or second day I was there, I was having a chat to Dennis Pagan actually, and he said, Henry, there's 2 types of people in this world. Those that have had a spray from John Sadler and those that are about to have a spray from John Sadler. And I said, no, everything's fine. He's good, da-da-da. And I went back to the coach a few weeks later and I said, yeah, I was in the first category, now I'm in the second category. So,
how many sprays did you cop?
No, it wasn't many, but it was just, look, I was at a stage where I probably could have gone training myself and I thought, I'll go and work for Sads for a bit and see how he does. He's obviously a very good trainer and someone I could learn from, and I just probably needed to be out training straight away, and I didn't feel like I needed to be there under the wrong circumstances. So, look, I kicked off after that, and I think I sublet 4 boxes off Brendan McCarthy at Caulfield in the old red brick stables there, and that was the start of it all.
First winner, Cranbourne one Friday night, am I right in thinking?
As far as official records go, yes, Edward, but I think I actually had a winner. I know I had a winner, but it wasn't in my name, in fact. But another story, we bought a horse called Le Spiel off clients of Robert Smurden's, and it was when I was working for Robert, and Robert actually suggested that I buy the horse. And this is all well and good to tell after the fact because Rob doesn't have a licence anymore, so I can't get him any more trouble. But Robert said that we should buy the horse, and I did, and we gelded him, and I got pretty much everyone I knew in the horse, my dad included, and we set the horse to win a race at Moonee Valley. It was the final of the Tour of Victoria series, which was worth about $150,000, and I was devastated. The lead up to that, he actually got beaten in the nose at Benalla. And famously, Michelle Payne rode the horse that day. She went to ride Le Spiel, but she actually picked up a ride on a horse of Stuart Webb's that day, which turned out to be Yosai. So while she lost the battle on Le Spiel, she probably won the war getting on Yosai and won a number of Group 1s on her. But Le Spiel got beaten in the nose, which we were devastated by, but managed to get in the final 2 weeks later because one horse that had won a heat didn't accept. And lo and behold, Le Spiel comes out and wins and wins a $150,000 race for all my family and friends. And it was particularly important because my father actually died the week later, and that was the only chance I had to train a winner for him, really. And he won, and then Dad passed away, so that was quite sad, but I was glad that we had that photo on the wall of that horse. So he was the first winner, inverted commas, but the first winner in my name was a horse called Prelusive Strike, who, another interesting story. I seem to have stories for everything.
Well, that's why you're here, Henry.
We took Prelusive Strike there that night and thought he could win. He was about 25 to 1 and I was a nobody. I'd never trained a winner and hence the odds were quite conducive to having a bet, you might say, Edward. And the lights went out. It was a night meeting at Cranbourne. It was one of the earlier night meetings I had there, and they ran the first 4 races and we were at race 5, the first leg of the quaddie. So I'd had Prelusive Strike 1 out in the quaddie, field, and had something on, obviously straight out. And they were going to the barriers. They ran our race. The horse won quite well. Then the lights went out after that and they called the rest of the meeting off. So they declared a quaddie dividend of $27, which was the winning price of the horse. But obviously with field swinging, it could have been anything. So I was a bit stiff that night, but I was very happy to have had the winner.
Just another way to do your day on the punt then.
Just another way. And the list is growing of ways to do it. I'm sort of getting a bit older and wiser now, so I'm not as brave as I was, I suppose.
Getting that first Group 1 win, Sontag, Queensland Derby of 2014, horse you bought for $58,000 as a tried horse from Derby. Tell us his story.
Yeah, well, that was just before the online sales came in vogue. So that was one of the old physical tried horse sales. You had to go out to Oaklands in the middle of winter and sit there there's just no worse a place in winter than Oaklands Junction to sit there and wait for horses. And I'd love to say we targeted that horse and we really wanted to buy him the rest of it. But honestly, there was about 5 horses on my list and the first 4 made too much money. We were just looking at those sort of second-hand Darley horses there, and this scrawny sort of 3-year-old walked into the ring and I thought, well, this might do me. If I don't buy him, I won't buy anything. So I think I ended up bidding $58,000 or $53,000 or whatever that the price was and got him, thankfully. But all the other 4 that came before him were absolutely useless, and we were just lucky we missed them and stumbled across him because he obviously did a great job for us and put us on the map to some extent very early in my career. As you said, he won the Queensland Derby, but I think that was about 6 months in my training career. He was probably the first horse I bought at a sale, and then 6 months later he was winning a Queensland Derby. So I sort of at the time thought, how easy is this and how long's this been going on? But it was an amazing experience with that horse. Once again, just family and friends involved, and never thought he'd get to the levels he did. We'd just be happy to sort of win a race with him, really. And a few issues along the way with him soundness-wise, but got him there, and then he went on to win country cups and that sort of stuff as well. But I think he lobbed in one of the worst Group 1s that have been run in this century, really. The form out of it wasn't great, and we probably knew that at the time, in fairness, but I think the previous 4 winners of the Queensland Derby had been sold to Hong Kong for big money, and we never got a phone call, Edward. So we're happy to continue on with him. He went out and won the Sale Cup first up next preparation, and that was another great day. I think if you speak to any of my mates, that's just the favourite or the most enjoyable day they've ever had in their life. We got a bus down there. It was the day after Cox Plate Day, so we'd all been out all night, and I couldn't hear of the horse getting beaten, so we just thought we're just going to go down there, punt up and win and the rest of it. And I think it was it was when, I can't remember who the corporate bookmaker was, but it was early doors. It might have been Bet365, and they were offering best of fixed price and tote guarantee. So you got best of top tote, and I was tipping it to all the boys, and everyone's backing it that night, and they're having thousands on it at the price of about $3.50 or $4, thinking that's what they're going to get. And then it's drifted on race day, and top tote was about $7 or $8. So they've all got 2 and 3 times what they thought they were going to get when they were first betting. So we all had a great day, got the bus home. We ended up back in St Kilda at a place called The Branch, which is on the corner of Ackland Street and somewhere down there near the beach. And back to the casino after that, and another all-nighter. And it was easy in those days. It was just amazing. I had about 12 or 14 horses in work. I was 27, 28 years old, just living the dream.
How important is that fun element for owners to have in your stable, in all honesty?
Oh, well, it was when I was 27 or 28, it was just me having fun, really, and all my mates. But now I'm a bit more conscious that not everyone's 27 or 28 anymore, and neither am I, Edward. So you need to sort of temper that a little bit to your client base and that sort of thing. But probably this whole situation with Asfoora over the last 18 months has really brought that back. There was probably a gap of 10 years in between there where I probably didn't set the world on fire or shoot the lights out. And then this has sort of brought that fun element back, just doing something different. And to be honest, training sometimes becomes a bit of a chore. It's the best job in the world when you've got a good horse, and it's the worst job in the world when you haven't. And as I said, the early days, it was just a matter of point and shoot, and you'd be winning good races. And then probably 6 or 7 years in between, I had some nice horses, but never sort of had that success I did early. And then the last couple of years, I'm probably back to that, which has just allowed us to have that fun again. And that whole European experience is something new and fresh and something that not many people have done before. And it just gives you a chance to travel, which as a trainer, you don't really get to do. You work pretty hard. And we spoke earlier about my sort of, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old years of uni and that sort of stuff. And you probably miss out on that travelling element once you start training, because it's hard enough to get away for 2 or 3 days, let alone a few weeks. So having an excuse to get overseas with a horse like Asfoora was just a magic experience.
We'll expand upon that in a moment. But those leaner years then, so you have Sontag doing what he did, then you had Precious Gem.
Yeah.
Say after that, when you are going through a leaner time of things after you'd started off so well, what goes through your mind? What do you try to do to correct things, or is it just a case of backing yourself and your processes and letting nature take its course?
Yeah, well, you're not doing anything different. In fact, if I look back now and thinking what I know now versus what I knew then, I'm a much better trainer now than I was then, I can assure you. But just the results were reflective of just a lot of luck at the time. Like, as I said, Sontag could have been one of 5 horses I purchased and 4 of them would have been no good, and I got him. Precious Gem was a 6 or 7-year-old mare when I got my hands on her, and she'd had 30-odd starts and was a very good bush mare who'd, she'd won a race on Melbourne Cup Day from memory, but she just sort of sprouted wings with a change of environment. And I'd sort of even tried to not take her. At one stage, Jared Byers, the owner, rang me up to see if I'd be interested in taking her, and I sort of said to him, why would you take her off the trainer that's done such a good job with her? And I don't really, want to take her, but if you're going to, send her somewhere, I may as well take her. So I'll take her. And, that's the time when I was probably nicer than I am now too. So, but no, it was great. I think there's a stat, I think I bought 4 yearlings that first year, and I reckon one of them actually passed away through colic, but she was a very good filly who never got to the races, an Almaha filly. But the other 3 all ended up city winners and stakes winners. The other horse I bought, tried horse, was a horse called Mendeville, who won metro races in Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide. As I said, those 3 yearlings, one was Lucky Liberty, who won stakes races, one was See Me Flash, who won a couple of city races, and one was Rons Moss, who won a couple of city races. So if you said to someone starting their training career, or said to me now, you can go and buy 2 tried horses and they'll both be good city class or Group 1 winners, as it were, and 3 yearlings and they'd all be city winners and stakes winners. What are the odds of that? And I was just the beneficiary of an amazing amount of luck in getting those horses. And then everyone thought I was a genius and sort of started sending me horses. But unfortunately, you can't sustain the strike rate or the level of results when you're not having, you can't expect that luck to continue. So it was just naturally that was going to happen. And I ended up going from sort of 4 horses to 8 horses, 8 horses to 16 horses. I think Peter Moody closed his stable at that stage with his cobalt issue. I took over one of his barns, so I had another 30. Then Robert Smurden obviously went his, sort of left the industry, and I took over another 30 boxes there. So people say you grow too quickly and that sort of stuff and you don't have the systems. That wasn't right in my case. I was very capable of doing it, but I just couldn't sustain the luck I'd had early on. And, luck's luck. You can't do anything about it. It just comes and goes. So we had some leaner years, but as I said, good horses all the way through, and I had a number of good jumpers at that stage, which was good fun. But yeah, Asfoora sort of came along and sort of took it to another level.
So your previous good horses that you mentioned, Sontag, Precious Gem, both tried horses. How does Asfoora come into your life? Because she didn't make it through the yearling sales.
Yeah, well, this is when the luck came back into the equation, Edward. So I had a connection with the horse's owner, Akram El Fakri. So he runs a little startup at Euroa called Nora Lane. And when I say runs, he finances it. He's not a horse person, Akram, but he's an amazing sort of spender, I suppose, on the game. He loves the game, and he's always wanted to have a good horse, and he spent a lot of money trying to find that good horse and probably hadn't come across it. And I had a call from, it's a long story. You're going to have a bit of time here.
We've got all day, Henry.
Well, that's good. But so George Yanis, Akram's son-in-law, rang me and he said, you've got a filly running today called If Not Now When. Where does she rate? And I said, well, she's won her first 2 starts. She's an Artie Shealy filly. We didn't pay much money for her. We might have paid 12 or 14,000 for her, and she won really impressively. And I said, she'll probably get black type at some stage. She's no world beater, but she's a nice sort of 2-year-old that'll, win some races. He said, okay, well, there's a half sister to that filly going through the broodmare sale, the online sale, by I'm Invincible, who was just a first season stand at the time. She was a 3-year-old filly, this horse. David Bright Oak had trained her. Her name was Golden Child. And I said, okay, well, that'd make sense if you bought her on the basis of this will get black type at some stage. And he said, okay, I'll send it to Flying Artie because that'll make her a 3/4 brother or sister to your filly, and when she gets black type, then we'll be laughing. And I said, yep, no worries. So I actually went and looked at the horse for him, and she was very sore in the knees. She had issues. She wasn't a racing prospect, but she would go straight to stud. So George, on behalf of Akram, bought that mare for maybe 8 or 10,000, something like that, and sent her to Flying Artie as promised. And 2 years later, or a year later, they've got a little weanling filly out of her. So that filly's sort of grown up at their farm. She's gone to the Adelaide yearling sales. That was the only yearling sale she'd get into. And with all due respect to Adelaide Magic Millions, it's probably the lesser sale where the horse that don't get into, the Premier sale or the Gold Coast Magic Millions or the Sydney East sale go. I think Nora Lane had a draft for about 8 or 10 yearlings at that sale, and they sold 8 of the 10. And Akram rang me up and said, Henry, I'd like you to come and inspect 2 fillies at my farm. And the relationship there was that I'd been to school with 2 of his sons, Joseph and Hayef. They were a year above and a year below me at school. And he said, you can take your pick which one you want to train. And I thought, terrific. And this was early-ish in my career. And I went up the Hume Highway to their farm at Euroa, and there were these 2 fillies in the paddock. And I rung Akram afterwards and I said, Akram, thanks so much for the opportunity to go and go and look at these fillies. The Flying Artie had been through the yearling sale. She had a reserve of 30 on her, which was reflective of the stallion fee. The other filly was by unencumbered. She had a reserve of maybe 10 on her. And I said to Akram, I'd love to train the unencumbered filly for you. And he sort of was quite aghast when I told him that. And I said, well, I'm more than happy to train either of them. It doesn't worry me. They're your horses. I'm happy to train anything. Whichever you want me to train, I'll train. I just thought the unencumbered filly was a big, strong filly, and so the Flying Artie filly, and I was sort of trying to be nice. I said, she's going to take a bit of time to grow into herself, and just her legs aren't great, and she's a bit backward, and I couldn't have probably made it sound any nicer because there wasn't a lot to like about her at that stage, but he insisted that I train the Flying Artie filly as opposed to one I wanted to train, which another stroke of luck there. So she came into the system, wasn't anything special. As I said, she was very backward, needed a bit of time. She kept on going sore in the knees in her 2-year-old preparation. I think we gave her a jump out, and the Swan Hill Carnival was just around the corner midwinter. And I love the Swan Hill Carnival. It's our punters club every year. We sort of have that as our punters club end of season trip, and we all go up there for 3 days and get on the drink and the punt and the rest of it and back a few winners, and we always try and, set a few horses for the carnival. And she was going well enough to win the 975 metre 2-year-old maiden there, and I thought, all right, well, this will be us. This will be our banker for the weekend. And she galloped on the Tuesday before the Friday, and I actually hadn't checked her on the Wednesday morning, and she hopped on the truck on the Wednesday afternoon and got up to Swan Hill. We always used to go the day before in those days, and checked her shins, and she was horribly shin sore, and so I had to scratch her and couldn't run her. But so she didn't run. She went to the paddock, but with the benefit of hindsight, she would have been a pretty good thing in a 975 metre maiden at Swan Hill at her first start, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. So what, Colac was her first start?
Yeah, so that was next preparation. We tipped her out. She had, and Akram's a very patient man. He wanted to give her as long as possible out, so I think we gave her 3 months out. She came back into work, and once again, she never really showed us a heap at that stage. She was showing enough, but just always a bit sort of, behind the bridle and not really, those. Normally you think you've got a good sprinter, they show you a bit from early doors, but she never really did until she got, to race day, and then she kept on improving along the way. So she'd had a couple of jump outs, and I thought, yep, she's going great, good enough to win a maiden. And then we galloped her one morning at camp down on a wet track just before. I didn't quite trust myself to get her there first up, so I thought, well, I really need to test her. We'll pit her with another filly that's going pretty well, and we'll see how they go. And this other filly, her name was First Edition, and she was going really well. And I thought First Edition would go there and towel this Flying Artie thing up, and lo and behold, the Flying Artie, which is Asfoora, has obviously sailed past her, and I thought, oh, geez, she might be pretty good here. Well, the other ones galloped pretty bad, and I put it down to the wet track that First Division hadn't handled the wet track, and I thought, well, we're probably still in the same space we were. So went to Colac pretty confident. I was actually on TV on Channel 7 that day doing the mounting yard stuff, and in the studio, it was during COVID actually, and I was trying to watch the race out of the side of my eye, and I'd spoken to Dean Lester because he was sort of half across it all because he was a part owner of First Division, and we were obviously betting up at her first start, but I was a little bit apprehensive because Colac was Colac and it's a bit of a tricky track and the rest of it, but I needn't have worried. She sort of sailed past them and won pretty well. And then I thought, well, First Division, I had a pretty good opinion of as well. So we took her to Bendigo the week after, and she won by about 7. So I wish Asfoora had a run after First Division because I'd have been a lot more confident had she not run before. But anyway, these are just minor sort of things along the way. But the most important thing is finding good horses, and we sort of unearthed one that day, and I think she won her second start in a benchmark 58 at Stall, and then she went to Caulfield and won a sort of a midweek race over summer. And then I reckon I wanted to tip her out, and Akram wanted to go to a stakes race with her, and I said, yep, she was in decent order, we may as well. It was over 1,200, and she burned up early and really set good sectionals in front and just got nailed on the line late. I think she got beaten ahead, and ahead ran third in the Kevin Hayes or one of those fillies races. And I just thought that was her birthday, getting a bit of black type, running third in a stakes race. I obviously didn't know what was to come, but I thought, wow, geez, I've done a good job here. 3 wins and a black type placing in her first prep. Akram can be happy, and whatever happens now is a bonus.
Been a big bonus then. So she works her way nicely through the grades, but gets close without winning at Group 1 level in races like the Galaxy, the Oakley Plate. Was that frustrating that you had a filly that was clearly very, very good, but just couldn't quite win that big one for you?
It was all good when you're going through your grades because you can find as many 1,000-metre and 1,100-metre races as you want. So I think first up, that second preparation, we took her to Sandown one day on a Wednesday, and it was 1,078. And I reckon she all bar broke the track record on a soft 6, which was pretty impressive. And then I think it was that preparation. We took her to Moonee Valley one night, and even Akram will attest to this. It was sort of an interesting experience because I sort of didn't really want to run her, but was happy to, I'm always happy to do what the owners want to do. And I sort of said to Akram, 9:55 races around the valley. We've got a really nice filly here who's going towards stakes races. I just don't reckon we need to get her beaten. Like she can probably win. She started even money, and as she should have. But they're just messy races. You got a heap of horses that are just leaders, and they stop in your face. And if she misses the kick, which invariably happened, she's going to get come back on. And she actually nearly fell that night. Mitch Aiken was riding her, and those jockeys that probably don't have the high profile, they're under more pressure to keep winning on horses, I suppose, to retain the ride. And he probably went where he shouldn't have, and she almost came down. And that was the moment when Akram sort of almost to a fault. I'm never telling you what to do again, never again. And actually later on, it's become quite an incumbence because sometimes I'll ask Akram what he wants to do, and he won't even tell me what he wants to do because he's very conscious of not telling me what to do. So that actually helped at later stages with the second year when we were going to go back to the UK. The first year when she went over to Royal Ascot, I didn't think she was going as well as she could be. And if I had have owned her, or if anyone else had have owned her and I was making decisions, I wouldn't have probably taken her. And Akram had already said that he'd agreed to the plan and he wanted her to go. But he wouldn't come back and tell me he didn't want to go because he wouldn't tell me what to do. So thankfully that sort of all worked out really well in the long run. But that night at Moonee Valley where she got beaten, probably that was the best thing that could have happened to us because it just allowed us to sort of forge forward and chart the path. So I think she went to the Caulfield Sprint after that on Caulfield Cup Day and really won impressively there. I think John McNeil might have ridden her there. Went to the Derby Day race, the Begonia Bell, and won well enough there, but I sort of thought she was probably better around a bend at that stage. Caulfield really suited her. And then we had our sights set on the Oakley Plate for the next year, but unfortunately, the Oakley Plate was Caulfield to Sandown that year, and it just made it more like a sort of 11 or 1200, made it more like a 1200 Oakley Plate than an 1100 Oakley Plate. So that was probably her chance, and they only sort of get a couple of chances in handicaps, these horses, particularly mares. They get in with a lightweight, and that sort of year, which is 2 years ago now, the Oakley Plate, I think she might have had 53. The Galaxy, she might have had 52 and a half. She ran third in the Oakley Plate, but as I said, Sandown didn't suit her as much. And then she went to the Galaxy and drew wide and never saw daylight. She probably should have won that as well, but she won another couple of Group 2s and her rating went up, and the next year she was getting too much weight in those handicaps. So there was just going to be nothing left for her. There was the Moya in the spring. She ran second, looked the winner, broke the track record herself, got run down by Imperatriz. And then the Lightning is the only other option for you in the autumn. And you're always running into, your nature strips, your Imperatrizes, your superstars. So it's very hard here if you've got a horse that doesn't get 1200, whereas I don't know where the idea came from. I reckon I was just watching Royal Ascot and I was sort of going through the program and thought a bit of a punt, but maybe we could sort of think of something like this. And I started to plant the seed in Akram's head, and he sort of, as always, went along with it just through blind faith in me, which is probably always a dangerous proposition, Edward. But we put the wheels in motion a long while out, and the test was probably the second time she went to the Galaxy. We took her to Perth for the Quokka just to see how she'd cope with travelling, because I never thought she'd be a horse who'd be able to travel. She was very sort of revvy and always took a while to settle in a new environment. She's a bit box walky and that sort of thing. But to her credit, she copped it all, and it really was the making of her, that trip to Sydney, then Perth that year.
So a lot of horses from Australia have gone for Royal Ascot, but there's not many that have done a European campaign as such. Tell us about the decision-making and then the planning of that first trip overseas.
Yeah, well, that was the difference from what we sort of charted versus what most people do. Most people just parachute in for Royal Ascot. They get there 2 weeks before and then they're straight out and they're back in Australia for the spring. But as I mentioned previously, there's only 2 options for her each year in Australia. So we thought we'd find as many options as we could over there. And given we were going to be over there, well, why wouldn't we? So you need a number of factors to allow a horse to do what we did. First and foremostly, you need a very supportive owner, which we had in Akram, and was happy to fund the operation. It wasn't a cheap trip, I can guarantee you. And then second of all, you need a horse that there's no reason to say in Australia. Like most sprinters, you're running around in Everest, good sprinters, you're running around Everest and all these now slot races, Group 1's worth a lot more money than they're worth over there. We didn't have that option because she wasn't going to get those 1,200-metre races. And then you've got to stumble across a year, which we did, where maybe the opposition in England was a little bit substandard, and we sort of picked our mark quite early. And, Tash was there the year before, and, there just seemed like there was a bit of a lack of a top sprinter there, and we might be a chance. And when I say a chance, my mission was to go over there and cover costs. And the costs were about 250,000 Aussie, and I thought if we could run a placing at Ascot or at York or maybe win a Group 2 or Group 3, we'd sort of break even. And if we could do that, it'd be a great result. We've ticked the financial side of it. We've ticked the travel and the fun side of it. And it'd be a perfect sort of scenario if we could do that. But obviously it went a little bit more than that.
So you have the lead-up run at Haydock where she blows away the cobwebs, goes to Royal Ascot. Tell us about the lead-up to Ascot and meeting a certain king.
Yeah, so Haydock was just the run she had to have, and it was very wet that day. And not that she doesn't handle soft tracks, it was more so Haydock's pretty flat, but then you got a pretty steep last 100 and wasn't screwed down. Obviously hadn't been there that long and just needed the run. Had a few weeks to tighten the screws, which we did, and I was confident she was going really well, but how could he be confident off a 4th or 5th in a Group 3 at Haydock to be going to Royal Ascot? So we were there, so we had to go, obviously, and they'd paid us a little bit of subsidy money to get over there, so we obviously had to go. Akram, the owner, was coming over. I was obviously very nervous, a pretty big day for a young bloke from Australia. We'd been there for about a week in the lead up. We'd done all the press stuff, and there was no other Australian horses there, so we were sort of the big ticket item in inverted commas, because I think everyone over there knew we weren't very good, and we probably knew ourselves we weren't a top liner, but we were sort of there, and as I mentioned before, we'd picked our mark. We knew that the other sprinters weren't good, so if you've got a benchmark 64 horses running against benchmark 52 horses, they're going to win. They're not a champion, but they're going to win. And we probably were in that scenario that day. We arrived on course. It's all very different there. They go to the stabling area, which then you cross the road up across the front of Royal Ascot. You walk to the pre-parade ring. Chanel was there looking after the horse. We had Amy Murphy and her husband, Lemos de Souza, we were staying with. They were sort of showing us where to go, and actually had Simon Morris there with me and Peter Chow there with me, who'd come over for the week, 2 good mates, and they were helping me saddle the horse. And just as I was tightening the girth up, I was on the near side. Someone from the officialdom there has come up and said to me, "Oh, the king will see you now." And I sort of never got any forewarning that this was happening, or nobody said, "Oh, there'd be a chance you might meet the king." I wasn't expecting it, and I sort of was halfway through saddling up, and I said, "Well, look, I'm sort of a bit busy here. I'm sort of a bit hot under the brow and a bit sweaty, and I just need to get this done, and then I'll come down there for sure." And they said, no, you got to come now. And I said, well, I can't come now. Either we saddle the horse up and it runs, or I come with you and the horse doesn't run. I need to get the saddle on. And they said, no worries, but you can't make the king wait. And I said, conscious of that, obviously, but just got to get this job done and then I'll come down. So got the horse saddled up. She's walked out. I've sort of run down with this bloke, the king and the queen were there standing, waiting for me. Had a quick chat to them very briefly. Apologised for making them wait, obviously, but they were very good about it. They understood. Had a chat about the King's days at Geelong. He went to Geelong Grammar, and I said I used to play cricket on the oval there and a bit of that. And he was asking about where the horses train and Ballarat. He said, I know Ballarat. And just had a good chinwag about it. And I sort of finished the conversation with the line that, look, it's been terrific to meet you, but obviously I'd like to meet you after the race more than now because that's when you'll be sending the trophy. Can we make that happen? And he said, I'll see what I can do. So after the race, we went up and had a chuckle and he said, I told you I could do this. And he said he'd had something on the horse on my advice. And so he was pretty happy about life. And it was just a special sort of moment. And, I'm not exactly I'm not a monarchist and I'm not an anti-monarchist. It's irrelevant to us in Australia, I suppose, other than having the Union Jack on the flag. But certainly a life experience that you'll take with you to the grave. And I think the most poignant thing of it, when I came back to Australia, I picked the kids up from school one afternoon and Violet, my then, she was in grade 1, I think, and she said, I heard someone say in the playground that he met the king and I think they were talking about you. And I thought, that was good. And it was just a life experience, obviously.
Are they pinch yourself kind of moments?
Yeah, for sure. And as I said, it's the best job in the world when you've got a good horse and the worst when you haven't. And I've probably used this line a few times, but my favourite saying in life, and particularly racing, is that you can't appreciate the view from the highest mountain without going through the lowest valley, because it's all those bad moments as a horse trainer you have that make the good moments more special. And they really are, because those days when you're ringing owners telling their horse has broken a leg or you're getting horses beaten that should be winning and you're just having no luck, if you didn't have those moments, then what would the good ones mean? They'd mean nothing. So that's why they're so special. So that in particular, I never thought that'd be the highest mountain, but as it turns out it is, and there's been 2 more mountains this year too.
What about that win at Ascot just before we get to this year, as far as a number of people were saying your horse wasn't up to the standard to go to Royal Ascot? You even one owner texted you to say it was embarrassing to others who'd been to Ascot before, given Nature Strip, Choisir, Black Caviar had all been there. Was there a bit of, I've proven you wrong?
Yeah, well, we'll address the elephant in the room. That was Rod Lyons, Edward, who I'd actually trained a couple of horses for before. And it was just weird because I'd never had a blue with Rod in my life. There was no issue. And this was 6 years after the fact. And I'm sitting there at Saturday morning at Ballarat in the cold, and I get an email from Rod. I think it said waste of time, waste of money, embarrassing Australian sprinters or something to that effect. And that sort of put me back a bit. And I just sort of thought about it, and I was going to give him a spray, and I said, no, don't worry about it. I said, he's done the best thing possible here. What's going to happen now is as soon as he sends out, now the horse is going to win. He's given it a reason to win. So it's actually the first thing I thought about when the horse went over the line at Royal Ascot. And funnily enough, after that day, we're in the winner's room, and I noticed there was a picture of Nature Strip on the wall in the winner's room there. And I said they were very keen to get us back next year, obviously, given we'd won. And I was talking to Nick Smith and a couple of the Ascot people, and they said, anything we can do to get you back next year, look, I'd really, anything we could do. We need you here next year. I said, well, more than happy to come back, Nick, but there is one thing you can do for me. That photo of Nature Strip in the winning owner's room there, I said, if you replace that with a picture of Asfoora, I'll come back next year. And I actually don't know whether they did or not, because I never got in the winner's room this year, but that was my condition upon coming back.
Maybe next year you can go and figure that one out.
We might try that, Edward. That'd be good.
So what a lot of horses say, Take It Over Target was one who went back. Most horses don't go back to Ascot. It's a one-and-done kind of scenario, but you did. Ascot didn't quite go to plan with a number of things, but you then get the opportunity to win at York and to win at Paris. How do you look back on this year's European Odyssey?
Yeah, well, once again, it was more Akram that wanted to go than me. I sort of thought we'd, crossed that bridge last year and done what we could, and she's an ageing mare now, and it took her so long to reacclimatise to Australia when we brought her back, in the middle of summer, Christmas time. She had a winter coat on her 1 inch long, and she thought she was still in the other hemisphere. And then finally, when she did reacclimatise, we'd taken her to Adelaide. She won her first up run over there as she should have. She went okay in the Sangster, but it was 6 furlongs again, which probably tested her out. And it was same as last year. The jury was out whether she was going well enough to try and take on that sort of task again. And as I said, it hadn't been the smoothest lead up with the reacclimatisation process. So I was in two minds whether she goes. Akram was hell-bent on going, and I was happy to go with it. We ripped her out of a -4 morning in Ballarat the day she got on the truck to go to the airport, and she landed at Stansted Airport a day and a half later, 36 hours later, and it was 33 degrees. So it was just a really hard task for her, and that was only, we had trouble getting a flight over there. That was only, I think, about 2 weeks before her Ascot. So we were never going to have her in peak condition for her Ascot, and she ran a really good race. She might have run 7th, but she was only beaten a couple of lengths, and I just knew that she was going to need to improve a fair bit, or we were going to need to do something with her to get her, winning races. So we obviously, through Matt Kamani at Ballarat, we got to know Luca and Sarah pretty well, and we'd been out to their place, Fiddick Stud, for lunch last time we were there, and I asked Sarah if maybe she could have Asfoora at their place for 3 weeks in the paddock. And I just thought she needed 3 weeks of doing nothing just to sort of try and acclimatise a bit further, and we had a good break between Ascot and Goodwood, and to their credit out there, they managed to put on 24 kilos in about 2.5 weeks. And I thought that's what we needed to do. We just need to get a bit healthier and a bit heavier and bouncing, and then we can sort of tighten the screws after that, because where we were just in no man's land. So I took her to Goodwood. It rained cats and dogs the night before. It was a heavy track. I thought she was ready to run really well, but the heavy track pulled her up. Went to the Nunthorpe. We'd had a failure at Ascot, a failure at Goodwood. Ascot, we knew there was an issue. She wasn't ready. Goodwood, we knew the wet track was the issue, but you still had to be keeping a fair bit of faith to think she could win the Nunthorpe. And I think she was 12 or 14 to 1 by the time they jumped. And lo and behold, we were sort of proven somewhat right by the fact she won. I wouldn't have said she won ultra impressively. She won well enough. But I thought she was still on the improve. But that's pretty much the end of the English sprinting season. Then you've got to go to Ireland for the Flying 5, which we did. She went over there, got a wet track again, which pulled her up. But then obviously the proof was in the pudding that she was still going well at Longchamp when she managed to win the Abbaye there.
Which is France's big race on their biggest day, Arc Day. And a lot of years you get a wet day at Longchamp on Arc Day, but weather was kinder to you this time.
Yeah, it was very wet leading up to it. We'd walked the track about 3 or 4 times in the days leading up, and it was rock hard before the rain started. So we knew it would be able to cope with a bit of rain. And we thought there was some showers forecast, but geez, it rained. It was just torrential the day before, and we were just cursing, thinking we're just out of luck here. We actually went and walked it after the rain that morning, and to our surprise, it wasn't too bad. It was wet enough, but just in our favour, that track was like a bowling green because it hadn't been raced on for probably 4 months. I think they race on that straight 5 furlong track up the middle of Longchamp maybe twice a year, something like that, and the Abbaye and maybe one other race. And as a result, it was just clean ground. We knew she'd be in the first few in running, so she's just going across untouched ground. While it might be wet, she's going to get a good bit of footing. It's not choppy like it was at Goodwood and the Curragh. So that gave us some hope. Hope, not confidence, I'd say, but hope. And then, the rest is history.
Well, a big part of that history, your Uber driver.
I thought we might be going down this path, Edward.
You knew this was coming, this part of the podcast, Henry. So wherever you go when you're travelling, you need your passport with you. Why didn't Asfoora have hers at Longchamp that day?
Just an oversight. We'd actually bought a horse at the Arc sale the night before, the horse and training sale, called Gratian Destiny, and that horse had gone back to Amy Murphy's in Shanty the previous night. 2 purple passports. When packing the bag, we just put the wrong passport in the race bag and left Asfoora's on the bench there at Shanty. Simple as that. Chanel rung me on the way to the races. She'd obviously gone in the truck with the horse. She'd arrived on course. I had a conversation with her a year and a half earlier before she left, and I'd sort of said to her, you've got to have a bit of responsibility over there. I'm not going to be there. You're in charge. You're making decisions. I'm going to come and go for races, but by and large, you're making some big decisions about this horse and what it's doing. And I said, you're going to make wrong decisions. I get that. I'm not going to blue about them. If you do something wrong, though, I need to know about it so I can sort of mitigate against it and change things going forward and whatever. So I'm not going to carry on. Like, mistakes are mistakes. Everyone makes them. I know you're trying your hardest. Just do your best, and that's all you can do. And she rang me and said, look, do you remember that conversation we had? a year and a half ago when you said I'm going to make mistakes. And I said, yeah. And at that time I'm thinking, oh, shit, she's left the colours behind and Akram's coming over for the race and he's going to be wild about it. And, oh, geez, that's a big mistake. And I said, oh, you've left the colours, haven't you? She said, no. I said, oh, that's okay, yeah. And she said, I've left the passport. And I said, oh, right, okay. And at that stage I thought, well, it's not a big deal because we've got photos that we can get photos of the passport easily. Every horse is microchipped. They'll obviously scan on entry. And she's saying, no, they're not going to let her run. And I said, no, that's fine. I'll get there. I'll go and talk to the stewards. I'll explain the situation. They're not going to scratch a horse. It's come all the way from Australia to run. It's going to be the first horse to win in France, trained by an Australian. They won't do it. So I rocked up, went in there, bit of Aussie charm. I thought Aussie charm, Edward, and they didn't quite see the funny side of the situation, and they suggested that there's one set of rules for all, and I will abide by those rules. And if the passport's not there by the time the horse races, then she won't be running. And the irony of the situation is that she was the only horse pretty much in France that day that had a set of brands on her as well. So brands on the near side shoulder, offside shoulder. They don't have brands over there. They just have microchips. So she was microchipped. They scanned it. It's Asfoora. You got the brands to prove it. We sent them photos to prove it, but they still needed to cite that document. And in the steward's room there, they said, by the time the horse runs, we need the passport. And I said, okay, so the horses are circling behind the gates. What if the passport arrives then? They said, okay, well, we need the passport by the time the horses leave the mounting yard. I said, right, so it's getting tighter. And then another bloke chimes in from 3 deep. No, we need the passport by the time the horses enter the mounting yard. So at this stage, I'm sort of trying to concentrate and I'm trying to book an Uber at the same time, thinking we need to get the passport from Chantilly to Longchamp. And we had 54 minutes up our sleeve by the time, which was 10 minutes before the race when the horses leave the mounting yard. And that trip had taken me an hour and 50 minutes that morning. The day before, when we went to walk the track, it had been about an hour, 20 minutes. And I thought, we're just off. We're just no chance here. So I had to ring Akram and have the conversation. I've got the Uber booked. I've got the thing on the way just in blind faith, but thinking that we're not going to run. So I rung Akram, caught up with him, said, look, we've got an issue. I can't sugarcoat this. We've had a massive stuff up. We haven't bought the passport. We're probably not going to be running. And he was terrific about it. He copped on the chin, as he does with everything. We saddled the horse up. Asheen Murphy weighed out. We saddled the horse up knowing she probably wasn't running, but if by some fluke of happenstance it was to arrive, then she'd be there to go on the mounting yard. So the horses were circling around the mounting yard without Asfoora. She was out in the pre-parade ring. She was saddled up ready to go in, but they wouldn't let her in the mounting yard without the passport there. The first horse was leaving the mounting yard, which was our cue to be scratched. I had the head vet out the front of Longchamp with me with a walkie-talkie. I'm watching the Uber. Bloke's name was Mamadou, and you've got the app on your phone and you can watch him. And on this day, it was obviously Arc Day. It was Paris Fashion Weekend. There was a fun run going on around Longchamp with all these road closures and whatnot. And I'm watching it, and somehow he's just managed to navigate the greatest path through Paris you've ever seen. Normally you're watching, they stop at red lights and you're cursing. He never stopped. He just kept on going. And I don't know how quick he got or what he went through or what tickets he got to do it, but I'd put him on I said there'll be a big bonus for you if you get here in time. And the race was at 1:50 from memory. 1:40 was when the horses left the mounting yard. And at 1:39, he screeched up out the front, handed the passport out the window. The vets radioed through to the mounting yard. They've let her in the mounting yard. She's done half a lap and gone out with the other horses, straight round the barriers. And that was about 5 or 6 minutes before they actually jumped in the race. So at no stage until 5 minutes before they jumped did we know she was actually going to run. He's been pretty stiff, the Uber driver, actually, because before the race we've obviously given him I think I gave him €200 cash or something like that, which was a big sling, and she hadn't won yet. And then after the race she's won, and I thought I better tip in some more for this bloke. He's the story of the day. And so I've gone to the app and I've tipped him on the app, and I've gone and type in €500 and it's got to 50 and it said maximum tip exceeded. So you can only get 50 of the 500. So he's been a bit stiff, but he's got his 50 and the 200 earlier, and he's a hero that he wouldn't even know he's a hero.
Okay. Mamadou, if you are watching or listening, write in. We'll see if
there's been a massive, every horse of mine that gets registered these days, every time there's a suggestion, it's Mamadou to name the horse Mamadou. So I'm sure there'll be a Mamadou at some stage.
What was your heart rate like at that point? You must have been sweating profusely, Henry.
Look, it wasn't even in question that she'd run. Like it was, I know she did in the end, but The heart rate wasn't too high because I was just resigned to the fact we weren't running. I was just depressed, really. I'd had the conversation with Akram. I had a heap of mates and stuff there that had come from England and Australia, and I just was dejected, really. So for it to actually come off made it even more special.
So an incredible couple of years with Asfoora. Is there a highlight there? Is there a standout moment for you?
I don't know. Like each win's special for its own reason. Ascot, the first year, was sort of back against the wall stuff and wasn't expected, so it was a bit of a surprise, and it was Ascot. Whereas, when she won at York this year, once again, it was back against the wall and she really needed to show that she was going well. We thought she was, but she had a few setbacks leading up to it, and once again, it was under a bit of pressure because the back was against the wall, and then France was just the cherry on top at the end, but it was more special because, as we said, the first Australian trained horse to win in France, let alone a Group 1. So each very special in their own right. But probably the most special part for me is not even just the race win, it's just the experience of preparing a horse in Newmarket and getting to know a heap of new people over there and the sights we've seen and the nights out we've had. Like I've been to 15 or 20 different race courses over there in our downtime and a European summer as opposed to being in Ballarat in midwinter. It's just been like an ongoing holiday and one where we've had all sorts of doors open to meet new people. And you speak of the King, obviously, which was special, but just hundreds of other people that I now have friendships with. And and hopefully it's ongoing into next year.
Hey, so what's that done for your career?
Look, it's given me tremendous moments and probably a few extra pages in the memoirs one day, Edward. I don't think it makes heaps of difference ongoing with your career because I've sort of made the decision that I don't want to train more than 50 horses at a time. So we've got 50 boxes at Ballarat. The aim's obviously always to increase the quality of those 50 horses. But look, I don't think there was a heap of everyone was, patting you on the back and that sort of stuff. But nobody rings you up and sends you a horse because you're trained to win at Royal Ascot. You've sort of got to have a real stream of group winners to attract much attention. And when you've only got 50 in work, you probably don't really have the luxury of doing that. So to an extent here, it hasn't made a difference. Over there, I reckon it has. I now buy horse at the horse in training sale there and a few privately. And given I've had, I've got 100% strike rate over there with one horse, they think I'm, Chris Waller or Kieran Maher or something. So it's like, well, we better give this bloke a horse. So I've been sent a few horses from over there and I find it easy enough to syndicate them over there with people that want to experience Australia's prize money and that sort of stuff. So it's been good on that side of the equation. But, in I think to put it in perspective, when I came back last year from Royal Ascot, I took 3 horses to Mount Gambier 2 days later after I arrived back and they all got beaten. And you're back to reality, really. People forget pretty quickly about the wins and, it doesn't make a huge difference. But certainly fun-wise and life experience-wise and, it's been amazing.
It's a good level of racing though, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's well known. The penthouse, the shit house, as they say, Edward, I suppose is the best way of putting it. But you just enjoy the highs and you get through the lows and wait for the next highs.
Someone else I was talking to about you also said one of your strengths, you can obviously train a horse, but there's more to being a horse trainer than just that. You've got to run your own business. You've got the accountancy side of things, the commerce degree, great people skills. Do you have that rare trifecta as a trainer?
Oh, I don't know if it's a rare trifecta, but I know there's hundreds of better horse trainers than me that haven't been able to make a go of it simply because they can't run a business and they don't have the luck I've had. As I said to start with, I've had an amazing amount of luck along the way and people say, that the harder you work, the luckier you get, that sort of stuff. But I think in racing, it's a bit of a misnomer. I think everybody works hard in racing. Only some people have the luck. And I had a lot of luck and I have had a lot of luck. And I've also been able to be savvy enough to keep my head above water financially, which isn't easy as a horse trainer. You're trying to collect debts after you've already paid them. You're dealing with staff. You're trying to sell horses. You're trying to buy horses you can't afford, spending money you don't have on credit, paying interest, trying to feed a lot of things at the same time. There's a lot of balls in the air and you're not really a horse trainer once you get past about 10 or 12 horses. You're just a CEO of any company and you're trying to train horses on the side, really. So you've got to be able to manage to do that and you've got to have good people around you to help you do that, which thankfully I do. And, you look like a genius when you win as always and you look like a mug when you lose or go broke, which invariably horse trainers do. So we wait for that day, Wood.
I'm sure you won't get there the way you're going. What's next for Asfoora?
She has stayed in England, so just based on how hard it was to bring her back and take her back again last year, we thought we'd leave her over there. And given there wasn't much for her here anyway, we thought that was the way to go. So she's gone back for a spell at Luca and Sarah Kamani's property. She's going to have a good 3 months out, and then we'll gear her up for the early races of next year. I think she ran, that Haydock Temple Stakes she ran in the first year. We might go there. There's a race at Newmarket on the Rolly Mile course called the Palace House Stakes, which is a 5 furlong Group 3. They're all set weights and penalties races, so they're not handicapped. She's not going to get too much weight. She'll go to Royal Ascot again, obviously, if she's up and well, and then we might try and find another couple of races for her. But I think, all good things must come to an end, and you'd be hard-pressed to say she'd be going on after next year. So you'd be thinking she'd be looking for a stallion sort of mid-year next year, so Southern Hemisphere time, whether it's over there or here, I'm not sure. But I think we'll get 4 or 5 runs out of her next year, and then that might be it.
So taking her and doing what you've done in Europe, you've done things that not many other Australians have ever done, will ever do. What's on your bucket list, though, training-wise, Henry, particularly from a home front point of view, because you're still a young trainer?
I think you're a young trainer till you're about 60, aren't you, Edward? So that's
you're a veteran after 60.
Correct. I've got time on my side. But, look, travelling horses is something that, opens doors you wouldn't think are possible, and that's been amazing. So we'd love to keep travelling horses, but you've got to have good horses to do it, and otherwise you look like an idiot. So I've bought a couple more horses over there at the Horse in Training sale recently. We're going to take them to Ascot too and try and have 3 runners at Royal Ascot next year, which would be amazing. Mid to longer term, it'd be amazing to have a Melbourne Cup winner. Obviously, that's the height of Australian racing. Where what are we, 8 days post Melbourne Cup Day, and the glow's still in the air, isn't it? It was a huge carnival and a huge Melbourne Cup. That's the pinnacle of Australian racing and almost world racing. So I've done it over there with Royal Ascot. I'd love to win a Melbourne Cup, and everything else is secondary to that. But on more achievable levels, I suppose, I've sort of set myself the task of winning as many country cups as I can. I'm up to 8, so I've got about 42 to go. So I'm just steadily working through my spreadsheet of country cups, and we'll see how far we get there.
All right. Plenty of time for both of those things. Henry, been great to have a chat about your career. Thanks for joining us on Sadler Sessions.
Thanks for having me in, Edward.